it's hard. It's hard to sugar the pill because it's genuinely quite scary. I mean that for like decades, if you talk to anyone, you kind of economists or people in geopolitics, and ask, if they had a list of the scariest kind of scenarios that could happen to the global economy, you'd have things like, I don't know, China taking possession of semiconductor foundries in Taiwan would be kind of high on the list. But the closure of the Straits of Hormuz would always be up there in the top five. And now it's happening.
Well, look, let's now turn our attention to the economic impact of this war. Today, Qatar's energy minister has warned that this conflict in the Middle East could bring down economies of the world, suggesting that all Gulf energy exporters would shut down production for weeks, driving oil prices to $150 a barrel. Now, Qatar, which is the world's second largest producer of liquid natural gas, says that even if the war ended immediately, it would take weeks to months to restart deliveries of liquid natural gas after an Iranian drone strike hit the largest plant. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is saying that the war in Iran has fueled demand for Russian energy, a day after the US Treasury issued a 30-day waiver allowing India to buy Russian oil stuck at sea. Now, the conflict, which entered its seventh day on Friday today, has left the Strait of Hormuz, a critical shipping passage, all but shut, with countries all around the world cut off from a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas supplies. This is, of course, going to have an effect on our economy, but how? Let's now speak with Ed Conway, who's the brilliant economics and data editor at Sky News. Ed, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Ayesha. How you doing?
I'm good. So listen, what do you think, what's your assessment on how this is going to affect the economy for us ordinary folk just going about our daily lives?
Well, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to sugar the pill because it's genuinely quite scary. I mean that for like decades, if you talk to anyone, you kind of economists or people in geopolitics, and ask, if they had a list of the scariest kind of scenarios that could happen to the global economy, you'd have things like, I don't know, China taking possession of semiconductor foundries in Taiwan would be kind of high on the list. But the closure of the Straits of Hormuz would always be up there in the top five. And now it's happening. It's actually happening. And it's happening at the same time as the closure basically of the Red Sea as well. So the Red Sea has been effectively closed to most traffic for the last couple of years as well because of drone strikes on, from Houthi rebels over there. And on top of that, Hormuz is much more scary. And the reason it's scary is that when you look at a map of where the oil and gas is, I mean, this is not all of the world's oil and gas, okay? And that's worth just underlining. But a disproportionate amount of the world's oil and gas is concentrated in a really small segment of the map. And if you look at the map of the Arabian Gulf, really just near the north of it and just around the coastline of Saudi Arabia and Qatar as well, you find basically kind of getting on for a quarter of the world's oil and gas. And you've got some pipelines around there. So you can get some of it out in alternative ways. But frankly, the vast majority of it goes out via tankers through the Straits of Hormuz. That's the case even now in 2026. And although we think we've kind of dematerialized as a world, and, all the talk is about AI and, computers and stuff like that, in practice, you still need this stuff. You still need it even in an era of renewables, because we need the gas partly to heat our homes right now, but also to provide the fertilizer that we need to feed ourselves. If you don't have fertilizer, you're not able to feed half the world's population. And where does most of the world's fertilizer come from? It comes from natural gas. And where does most of the world's supply of fertilizer come from? Well, about kind of 30-40% of it comes from inside the Arabian Gulf and passes through the Straits of Hormuz. So for me, this is a really scary period. And the slightly kind of dissonant thing is, you have some people, you were referring to the Qatari energy minister a moment ago. You have some people who sound absolutely terrified. And then by the same token, look at the S&P 500, the main benchmark measure of shares in the US. It's kind of just, treading water at the moment. The FTSE's down a little bit, but there are certain kind of prisms through which you can look at the world and it doesn't look terrifying. And then there are others which do look terrifying. And the thing that gives me kind of pause for concern is the people who are terrified are the people who understand energy, and that is worrying for me, because that is basically the heart of this. And I think we often underestimate, but we shouldn't really, given what happened in 2022 with Russia, but we underestimate the extent to which higher energy prices feed through to basically everything. And it trickles down in ways that are really hard to kind of quantify and to predict. So I'm kind of nervous for all of those reasons. And I just hope, I hope for all of our sake that the Strait doesn't stay closed, because it's basically closed right now. It's not mined. So that was one of the things that people kind of worried about. Would the Iranians kind of mine the Strait so you couldn't pass through it? But in practice, no one, apart from a few kind of shadow vessels of the Shadow Fleet and Iranian vessels, but no one is really passing through there. So we have an effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And maybe going in the 80s, you had something kind of slightly analogous. But if this goes on into next week and into the week after, we will never have, this is totally unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like this before. And it's at that point, all bets are off, really, for the global economy. And it's not just, it's Europe, we will be impacted. But there are other places. Think about Pakistan. They don't have much in the way of energy storage in Pakistan, but they have a deep reliance on liquefied natural gas. Think about places like India, places like Taiwan, South Korea. They are all in big trouble at the moment. And as a result, everyone is going to be charging for the same liquefied natural gas from wherever they can get it, which then is a problem for Europe, because even if we're not directly getting Qatari gas, we're still trying to get the liquefied natural gas from the US, or for that matter, from Russia. And there's a big queue of people trying to get that stuff now.
I mean, you've painted a very useful picture, but a very alarming picture, and you're so right. I mean,
sorry about that.
No, it's all right. We just want the truth. We can handle the truth here. And you're so right. Energy prices are literally at the heart of our entire economy. One of our listeners, Robert, has messaged in about the Straits of Hormuz, saying, look, can't there be convoys of gas and oil tankers? Can't sort of America and NATO air defence warships sort of escort people through the streets? What's the answer to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not a shipping expert, so I mean, it seems like it's not a crazy idea at all. I don't know how many you could kind of get through that way, whether it would, the extent to which it would satisfy demand, the extent to which they could get insurance. Because actually what's happening at the moment is just a lot of ships not passing through. It's interesting, if you kind of look at a map, Ayesha, and you can go online and look at this kind of marine traffic, I think is the website. Go online and look at the ships that normally pass through the straits. And what you see is they're kind of huddling on either side. So the ones that were trying to kind of get out, or were trying to get out before they kind of got worried or couldn't get insurance, are waiting inside. There's another group waiting outside. And essentially at the moment, it is a kind of almost impossible to get insurance to pass through there. And that, interestingly, that's something that to some extent is determined in London, because London is still the world capital for marine insurance. But right now, as I say, we're in uncharted territory. All of the cliches, I'm afraid, are kind of true about where we are right now. And the only hope is that it doesn't last too long, because I think the other worry, so we've got our own kind of semi-parochial but incredibly important concerns about what this does for our gas prices, about what happens to the production of semiconductors in Taiwan, because they need liquefied natural gas as well. So there's all this stuff outside of the Gulf. But I'd be even more worried, if I were inside the Gulf, for like a couple of reasons. First of all, for the oil producers, there is only so many days that they can continue to pump oil without it basically backing up into their systems and causing deep damage to the oil reservoirs. And so you have this existential question about, is this episode, because they can't get it out on tankers, is this going to cause this extraordinary kind of case of, it goes beyond indigestion. It could be totally destructive to some of the oil infrastructure in the world's most important energy system, in Kuwait in particular, and Iraq. They just don't have much more than a week or a couple of weeks worth of storage to kind of cater for that. But there's also kind of a non-oil thing, which is like, think about the Gulf economies. Think about what their, Dubai, and to some extent Qatar, what their economies have been built on in recent years. They've been trying to move away from oil and trying to encourage people in financial services and law and everything else to come across and to work in Dubai. About 80% of the population in Dubai and Qatar is immigrants. If those people suddenly decide that they don't want to be, they're under threat of bombardment in the future, then that is an existential threat to the entire economic model for the Gulf states.
Okay.
So this opens all sorts of kind of Pandora's boxes for the future, unfortunately, the longer it goes on.
Okay, lots of questions are coming through, Ed, so I'm just going to fire them at you. If you could give us as brief answers as possible.
Sure, I'll try.
Someone's just messaged through that, is this going to be a big boon for Russia?
Yes, and also America as well, because anyone who's making liquefied natural, this is the interesting thing. Anyone who's making gas right now outside of the Gulf is able to sell that gas for far more than before. So it's also quite good for Norway. It would be good for us if we had more North Sea gas, which is that's a whole other episode, I know, for you. But yeah, like anyone who's pumping gas outside or oil outside stands to benefit. But by the same token, in America, you're going to have higher gas prices, gasoline prices, so petrol prices at the pump, which is never popular with American voters. So I think Trump will be thinking about that as well. The
midterms coming up. Francine's just messaging saying, what about Norway? Can they start pumping more oil?
I mean, Norway's kind of maxed out and has been for a while. They're slightly more skewed towards gas, as I understand it, but they've been pumping as much as they can for a long time because we've had to deal with Russia, That's the great irony of this, is Europe is still just recovering from the last kind of 3-4 years, which has been grisly. And now along comes this. During that period, everyone was thinking, okay, well, at least we can depend on Qatar. I mean, seriously, that was one of the points that was being made back in 2022. Okay, we can't rely on Russia. Where are we going to get our gas from? Qatar. Qatar has just shut down that gas field. And as you were saying earlier, the longer it gets shut down for, the bigger the problem. So, yeah, I mean, Norway can try and pump more, but it's pretty maxed out. The North Sea's a bit maxed out right now.
And someone else just mentioned, could we do more drilling in the North Sea? Would that help?
Well, I mean, it is a big question, and I mean, we could definitely kind of eke more out of it. And actually, I think a lot of the kind of assumptions about the speed of decline are kind of overstated. But I don't think, even in the most optimistic scenarios, and even if you imagined a lot of the taxes and a lot of those incentives that have kind of gone, even in the most optimistic scenario, I think it would be hard to envisage us becoming a net exporter of oil or gas anymore. But we definitely could be producing more. So I think that is a legitimate conversation that we need to have in the coming years.
And what about if oil is, we're seeing how sort of fragile things are at the moment. Does this make an argument for also becoming more invested in non-fossil fuels and renewables?
Well, yeah, I mean, it does. Like anything you can do to ensure that you're less energy dependent on other countries around the world is clearly a good thing. And if you look at what China have been doing in recent years, I mean, China is still energy dependent on many countries, but they have loads more electric cars than they used to do. The fuel intensity of the Chinese economy is much lower than it used to be. So China is impacted. I mean, it will be impacted by this, but it is less impacted than it would have been had it not invested a lot more in its solar and in all of the renewables it has there. But by the same token, China also has a lot of coal. So they're still burning a lot of coal there. But yeah, I think this is both a reminder that we need more kind of energy security, but it's also a reminder that for all that, you still kind of need this stuff. Like a good example is fertilizers. We still at the moment, fertilizers come from gas and it's very hard to get them from renewables. It's like super expensive. Or helium. I know helium, like most of us think about helium as something you fill in balloons at kind of children's parties. That's usually what I use it for. But you need helium for MRI scanners, okay? So to run an MRI scanner, you need these superconducting magnets inside it, and they run at like incredibly low temperatures, like close to absolute zero. And kind of the only thing in the world that can allow you to do that is helium. And where does helium come from? It comes from natural gas. And so all of these unexpected ways in which it filtered through to our lives, still, they're not going away, even if we got all of our power from wind turbines and had battery backup. You still kind of need this stuff.
You've got that. You've got to have that mix of. You've got to have that.
You've got to have the mix.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Two quick questions. One's a kind of compound question. People just obviously thinking about, what's this going to mean for inflation? Is our interest rates going to come down later this year? Yeah.
No, sorry. Literally a week ago, everyone thought there were going to be 2 interest rate cuts. Now, all of a sudden, that looks like that's out of the water. So, yeah, this in the space of a few days, everything, I'm afraid, has changed. And so interest rates don't look like they're going to be cut right now. It's famous last words, okay, because no one knew this was going to happen a week ago, and everyone was widely saying, okay, the bank's maybe going to cut this month, maybe the month after. But if inflation is going to be more like kind of 2.75% rather than 2%, which is kind of what it might look like if gas prices go up where they look like they're going, then they're not going to be cutting anymore. So yeah, and that's bad for unemployment as well, because unemployment's kind of rising at the moment, and people were thinking, okay, at least the bank is going to be cutting rates a little bit more. They may not be right now.
And so much of the economy, of course, is linked to energy prices. And look, this takes me to my final question. And this is not just this government, all governments are, relentless in their pursuit of growth, and growth has been very, very difficult. Is the reality now, Ed, that we have to accept that no matter how good your domestic fiscal policy is, we are now at the mercy of these difficult international currents?
Well, I mean, I think we always have been, really. Like, particularly in the UK, we're really exposed to imports and exports. It's kind of the nature of our economy and has been for a long time. And it's quite hard to see it kind of going in any other direction. And that, that can have positives as well. I mean, if AI, the thing that's changed is, in the last kind of 3-4 years, even since, when Russia invaded Ukraine, is AI has come along, and it's very hard at the moment to work out how much of an impact that's going to have on our jobs, on everything else. But it is kind of an industrial revolution in the making that we're living through at the moment. And I kind of tend to be quite excited and optimistic, albeit that, it might be coming for my job quite soon. But
never.
That's no. But I mean, like, for any job that involves thinking, it's relevant. And I think that's exciting that we're living through that period at the moment. It's just that the other stuff hasn't gone away. Our dependence on physical things never went away. Your dependence on, concrete, on copper. You need copper to make, the server centers that AI functions with. What do you need copper to make copper? You need obviously the ores, but you need stuff to refine it. And one of the things you need to refine it is sulfuric acid. And where does sulfuric acid come from? It comes from oil. And a quarter of the world's sulfuric acid comes through the Strait of Hormuz out to places like Africa, where it goes into copper mines. So again, all roads kind of lead back to the fact that we're in this kind of interdependent world where if you slice one arm off, then you're in trouble. And slicing the Straits of Hormuz off is like the ultimate example of that, which is why, again, people got so scared about this in theory, and now it's kind of happening. We're trying to, kind of lift our jaws off the floor and work out what happens next.
Well, thanks for cheering us up, Ed.
Sorry, I was hoping to end on an optimistic note. I did have a bit of optimism with AI.
You did a little bit of the air, although Tom Whipple, our next guest, has said AI is going to come and kill us. But I mean, look, it's good to have a little bit of optimism. Ed, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And yeah, I mean, this is pretty stark stuff, but it's really important for us to hear it, particularly from an expert like yourself. Thank you so much. That's the brilliant Ed Conway, who is the economics and data editor for Sky News. Wow.